What if the Great Pyramid was never intended to be a tomb, but was instead a gargantuan machine designed to harvest the very breath of the cosmos? To understand this, we must move beyond the traditional view of stone and mortar and begin to see the pyramid as a geobiological transducer. Imagine a structure designed not to house the dead, but to bridge the gap between the terrestrial and the celestial. Some theorists suggest that the pyramids were engineered to tap into the immense reservoir of atmospheric electricity that surrounds our planet. By standing as massive, geometric conductors, these structures may have functioned as terrestrial antennas, pulling down energy from the ionosphere and channeling it into the earth below. Consider the apex of the pyramid. In many esoteric and fringe theories, the point of the structure is viewed as a sophisticated lightning rod. It is a focal point where the heavens meet the earth, a needle designed to pierce the veil of the atmosphere. Here, the pyramid would catch the raw, chaotic energy of the sky and begin the process of conversion. It would take cosmic radiation, the silent, invisible rain of particles from the stars, and transmute it into a usable, coherent form of energy. This process suggests that the pyramid was a filter, refining the wild power of the universe into a steady pulse that could be utilized by the civilization that built it. But this energy does not exist in a vacuum. It requires a circuit. This brings us to the concept of telluric currents, the natural electrical currents that flow through the Earth's crust. The pyramid was not merely a receiver, it was a grounding mechanism. By synchronizing the massive weight and geometric precision of the structure with the Earth's own magnetic field, the ancient architects may have created a resonance chamber. They were effectively plugging a celestial battery into the planetary grid. The stone became a bridge, allowing the flow of energy to move from the atmosphere, through the apex, and into the very bedrock of the continent. This leads us into the metaphysical realm, where the physical and the spiritual merge. In many ancient traditions, life is described as a flow of vital energy, known as prana or chi. If we view the pyramid through this lens, the structure becomes a spiritual conduit. It was designed to channel this life force, focusing it into the interior chambers where it could be concentrated and redistributed. By using specific minerals and massive proportions, the builders may have been attempting to harmonize the human biofield with the vibration of the planet itself. The pyramid was a machine of transcendence. But if the pyramid was indeed a machine designed to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, we must ask why the builders chose this specific patch of desert to anchor their grand design. To understand the placement of the Giza Plateau, we must peer beneath the shifting sands and into the very marrow of the planet. The location was not chosen for its aesthetic beauty or its ease of access, but for a profound and startling geological anomaly that exists deep within the limestone bedrock. Modern geological surveys and esoteric studies have begun to uncover a subterranean landscape that behaves far differently than the surrounding wasteland. At the heart of this mystery is a startlingly high concentration of quartz-bearing rocks embedded within the foundation. Quartz is not merely a common mineral. It is a piezoelectric material, capable of generating an electric charge when subjected to mechanical stress or pressure. Beneath the weight of millions of tons of stone, the quartz crystals in the Giza bedrock act as a massive, natural semiconductor. This mineral wealth suggests that the plateau was not just a building site, but a pre-existing geological battery, primed to react to the external stimuli provided by the pyramids above. When we layer this mineral composition over the map of the Earth's crust, we find further evidence of a deliberate selection. The Giza Plateau sits atop a complex web of deep-seated fault lines. These fractures in the Earth's crust are the pathways for telluric currents, the slow-moving electrical flows of our planet. By constructing their monuments over these specific fractures, the ancient architects were essentially tapping into the Earth's nervous system. The fault lines served as the veins, while the quartz-heavy limestone served as the nodes where energy could be gathered and amplified. Furthermore, researchers have observed localized magnetic fluctuations in this specific region that defy standard geological expectations. These fluctuations suggest that the ground here possesses a unique ability to distort or intensify magnetic fields. When you combine these magnetic anomalies with the high concentration of quartz, a fascinating hypothesis emerges. The site may have functioned as a natural subterranean battery, a place where the Earth's internal energy was already concentrated and ready to be harnessed. The chemical composition of the limestone itself plays a crucial role in this symphony of power. It is more than just a building material, it is a conductive medium. The limestone's unique porous structure and mineral density allowed it to interact with the geological anomalies, creating a foundation for power amplification. The pyramid was not simply sitting on the ground, it was integrated into a massive geological circuit. It was the final component in a machine that spanned from the stars, down through the apex of the stone, and deep into the vibrating, quartz-rich marrow of the Earth. But if this plateau was a geological battery, how did the ancient architects identify the exact ley lines of the planet to ensure their machines were perfectly synced with the world's hidden pulse? To find these invisible highways of power, the architects did not rely on modern maps, but on the sophisticated art of ancient geomancy. This was a science of sensing, a method of reading the Earth's heartbeat through the subtle interplay of water, light, and vibration. One of the most profound techniques involved water-based divination. By observing the way water moved, pooled, or flowed around certain rock formations, the builders could trace the movement of what they called dragon veins. These are the subterranean paths of Earth energy, where the planet's internal vitality flows like a river beneath the surface. They understood that water is a sensitive medium, capable of reacting to the subtle fluctuations of these energetic currents. By mapping where water naturally gathered or diverted, they were effectively tracing the circulatory system of the Earth. These dragon veins were not random, they were inextricably linked to the heavens. The architects understood an astronomical correlation between ley lines and distant star clusters. They recognized that the Earth is not an isolated sphere, but a spinning body caught in a cosmic web. They mapped the terrestrial lines by projecting the positions of specific constellations onto the ground, seeking the geometric intersections where celestial vibrations met planetary nodes. They were looking for the sacred geometry of the universe, identifying spots where the vibration of a star cluster aligned perfectly with the magnetic pull of the Earth. To refine this search, they likely employed the use of polarized light. By observing how light refracted through the atmosphere and interacted with the landscape, they could detect invisible energy flows. Just as modern sensors can pick up electromagnetic signatures, the ancient masters watched for the way light shimmered or shifted over specific zones of high mineral density. These were the spiritual nodes, the points of maximum intensity where the Earth's energy could be most easily harnessed. The final selection of a site was a process of deep resonance. The architects would have sought locations that vibrated in harmony with specific planetary movements. They were looking for the sweet spots of the globe, where the geometric intersection of these spiritual nodes created a stable platform for their monuments. By placing a pyramid at such a node, they weren't just building a structure, they were anchoring a celestial circuit into the very spine of the world. They were identifying the planet's nervous system and placing their monuments at the primary synapses, ensuring that every stone laid down would hum in perfect symphony with the rotation of the stars and the pulse of the Earth. And yet, if the site was the synapse and the ley lines were the veins, we must eventually turn our gaze toward the very cells of the machine, the stones themselves. To understand the true purpose of these monuments, we must look beyond the sheer mass of the blocks and investigate the esoteric mineralogy that allowed these structures to resonate as a single, coherent entity. The ancient architects were not merely moving rock, They were selecting specific minerals for their inherent molecular vibrations, treating the construction materials as components of a gargantuan lithic circuit. At the heart of this mineral selection is the inclusion of piezoelectric quartz. As we have seen, the bedrock itself is rich with this mineral, but the builders took this a step further by integrating specific stones known for their crystalline purity. Quartz has the remarkable ability to convert mechanical stress into electrical energy and, conversely, to respond to electrical fields by physically vibrating. By utilizing stones with high quartz content, the architects ensured that the pyramid could act as a transducer, converting the pressure of the Earth's weight into a continuous, low-frequency hum. This vibration is further refined by the specific proportions of granite and limestone. These two materials were not chosen for mere aesthetic durability, but for their contrasting acoustic properties. Granite, particularly the red granite sourced from Aswan, possesses a dense, crystalline structure that carries high-frequency vibrations with minimal loss. In contrast, the limestone serves as a more porous, receptive medium. When these materials are layered in specific ratios, they create a sophisticated acoustic gradient. The granite acts as the transmitter, holding the vibration, while the limestone acts as the resonator, allowing the energy to expand and permeate the interior chambers. Deep within the molecular structure of these stones lies a hidden chemistry. Analysis of these ancient materials reveals the presence of trace rare earth elements, minerals that are increasingly rare in the modern world but were once abundant in specific geological deposits. These elements are known to influence the way a material interacts with electromagnetic fields. When these minerals are compressed into the massive blocks of the pyramids, they contribute to a phenomenon known as living stone resonance. This is the idea that the stone is not a dead object, but a medium that maintains a state of perpetual molecular agitation, humming in sympathy with the planet's own frequency. The selection of these materials was dictated entirely by acoustic properties. Every block was a note in a silent symphony. The builders understood that by aligning the molecular vibrations of the stone with the geometric proportions of the pyramid, they could create a standing wave of energy. This was not a static monument. It was a vibrating chamber where the very atoms of the stone were synchronized. The result was a structure that did not merely sit upon the earth, but pulsed with it. But if the stones were designed to pulse with the heartbeat of the planet, we must ask why the very orientation of these massive blocks was anchored to the distant stars rather than the cycle of the sun. To the modern eye, the sun is the most obvious source of power. Yet for the ancient architects, the solar path was a fleeting, shifting thing. The sun rises, it sets, and its position in the sky is in a constant state of flux. In contrast, the stars offered something far more profound for a civilization seeking to build a bridge to the eternal. They were looking for permanence, and in the night sky, they found it in the circumpolar stars. These are the stars that never set, the ones that circle the celestial pole in a perpetual dance. By aligning the pyramid to these fixed points of the heavens, the builders were anchoring their structure to the immutable laws of the universe. While the sun moves through the seasons and changes its face, the circumpolar stars represent the unchanging backbone of the cosmos. They provided a reliable, unwavering reference point, a way to lock the terrestrial monument into a specific coordinate in the vast, overarching architecture of space. This was not merely a matter of navigation. It was an act of spiritual synchronization. They were aligning their work with the eternal, the parts of the universe that remain constant while all else decays and shifts. Furthermore, the stars served as a cosmic clock of immense precision. By observing the minute movements of stellar bodies, the architects could calculate the passage of vast epochs of time, far beyond the human lifespan. They were aware of the precession of the equinoxes, the slow, wobbling rotation of the Earth's axis that causes the stars to shift position over thousands of years. By aligning the stones to specific constellations, they were encoding a message into the very geometry of the pyramid that would only remain accurate for a specific window of time. It was a way of syncing the building with the long-term mechanics of the planet's rotation, creating a structure that functioned in harmony with the deep time of the universe. In the spiritual realm, the night sky was seen as the domain of the infinite. The sun represents the cycle of life and death, the daily pulse of the material world. But the stars, shining in the velvet darkness, represented the realm of the divine and the everlasting. By orienting the stones toward the stars, the builders were effectively pointing their machine toward the source of all existence. They were creating a gateway where the finite stone of the earth could meet the infinite light of the heavens. The pyramid became a needle pointing toward the forever, a way to harvest the silent, steady energy of the eternal night sky and channel it into the sanctuary of the desert. They weren't just building a tomb or a temple. They were aligning their masterpiece with the blueprint of eternity itself. And if the pyramids were aligned with the blueprint of eternity itself, we must eventually confront the most haunting question of all. Who were the architects of the void who first drafted these impossible designs? To answer this, we must step beyond the borders of recorded history and into the shadows of a precursor civilization, a culture that existed before the rise of the dynasties we recognize today. Some theorists point toward the lost tribe hypothesis, suggesting that a technologically advanced society, perhaps displaced by a global cataclysm, left behind a legacy of high-level engineering that later cultures merely inherited and replicated. This was not a civilization of primitive tools, but a high-technology maritime culture that mastered the movement of massive weights and the manipulation of energy across vast distances. They were the keepers of a science so advanced that it was eventually lost, leaving only the colossal stone remains as their final, silent testament. These architects did not communicate through blueprints as we understand them today. Instead, they utilized a sophisticated system of oral blueprints, transmitting complex mathematical data across generations through rhythmic chants, sacred songs, and mnemonic devices. Knowledge was not written on paper. It was woven into the collective memory of a people. This ensured that the sacred geometry of the pyramids remained pure, protected from the degradation of the written word, and preserved in the very breath of the practitioners. Within this shadow history, the architects were likely a specialized priestly caste of mathematicians. They were the elite of the elite, individuals who understood that geometry was not just a way to measure land, but a language used to describe the laws of the universe. To them, a triangle was not a shape, it was a frequency. A circle was not a curve, it was a cycle of time. They encoded this knowledge into symbolic geometry, using proportions like the golden ratio and pi to ensure that the structures would remain mathematically active for millennia. By building in these proportions, they were creating a physical manifestation of a universal truth, a way to make the invisible laws of physics visible to the human eye. However, some researchers take the mystery a step further, proposing a possibility that challenges our understanding of human evolution altogether. They suggest a non-human influence on the engineering, a source of inspiration or direct intervention from an intelligence that viewed the Earth as a canvas for cosmic engineering. This theory suggests that the blueprints were not merely drafted by human hands, but were dictated by a source that understood the planet's ley lines and mineral resonances with a precision that borders on the supernatural. Whether these architects were a lost human lineage or something beyond our current comprehension, they possessed a mastery of the void, the empty space between atoms and stars, allowing them to construct monuments that continue to hum with a mystery we are only beginning to decode. Imagine standing before a monolith of granite weighing over 80 tons, a weight so immense that it defies the logic of primitive tools and manual labor. How did a civilization, existing thousands of years before the invention of the internal combustion engine or the steel crane, move these impossible masses across hundreds of miles of treacherous terrain? To understand this, we must peel back the layers of conventional history and look into the lost engineering of the ancient world. Mainstream scholars often point to the use of massive workforce organization as the primary driver. They describe thousands of laborers pulling heavy stone sledges over tracks of lubricated sand. While this method is physically possible, it fails to explain the sheer scale of the movement. Some of these stones were moved from quarries hundreds of miles away, across mountains and through river valleys. If we look closer at the logistical feats of the era, we see evidence of a much more sophisticated mechanical understanding. One theory suggests the use of advanced pulley systems, but not the simple ropes we recognize today. These may have been complex, multi-point mechanical advantages that allowed a small group of people to exert force far beyond their physical limits. However, even the most efficient pulley cannot explain the seamless placement of stones that seem to fit together with microscopic precision. This leads us to the more mysterious possibilities of ancient physics. Some researchers have proposed the theory of hydraulic lifting. By mastering the flow of water, ancient engineers may have created systems of pressure and buoyancy to float massive stones along prepared channels, essentially moving mountains by making them weightless in water. Others look toward the possibility of magnetic levitation. If the builders understood the electromagnetic properties of the minerals used in construction, they might have utilized natural magnetic anomalies or engineered fields to slide stones across the earth with minimal friction, a feat that would appear as true magic to any observer. The movement of these stones was not merely a feat of strength, but a masterpiece of coordination. It required a level of logistical planning that rivals modern industrial systems. Every stone had to be measured, marked, and transported in a sequence that ensured the structural integrity of the rising monument. This was the art of the lost engineering, a science of movement that has been largely erased from our modern textbooks. We are left to wonder if we are looking at a lack of technology or simply a different kind of technology. Perhaps the secret lies in a mastery of forces we have forgotten how to harness. As we contemplate the silent giants of the desert, we must ask ourselves if the ancients were limited by their tools, or if they possessed a profound understanding of the Earth's hidden mechanics. And yet, even if we assume the ancients possessed a mastery over magnetism or hydraulics, a profound question remains regarding the very ground upon which these monuments were built. How did they navigate the shifting, resistant dunes of the Sahara to move masses that would normally sink into the earth? The answer may lie not in the strength of muscles, but in the invisible power of sound. We are beginning to understand that the architects of the pyramids may have mastered a form of acoustic engineering that allowed them to manipulate the physical state of matter itself. At the heart of this mystery is the phenomenon of vibration-induced liquefaction. In modern soil mechanics, we know that when sand is subjected to specific, high-frequency vibrations, the friction between individual grains of sand is momentarily neutralized. The grains lose their structural grip, and the sand begins to behave like a liquid. Imagine a massive stone sledge resting on a desert floor. By applying a precise, low-frequency hum to the ground, the ancient builders could have effectively turned the solid earth into a flowing river of sand, allowing the stones to glide across the terrain with almost zero resistance. This mastery suggests a deep understanding of cymatics, the study of how sound waves create geometric patterns in physical media. By utilizing specific resonant frequencies, the builders could have created standing waves that organized the movement of particles. This wasn't merely a byproduct of noise, but a deliberate application of sonic engineering. Archaeological evidence points toward the use of specialized acoustic tools, perhaps large, hollow resonance chambers or massive lithophones. These instruments would have been designed to produce sustained, deep-frequency tones that could travel through the earth for miles. Furthermore, we must consider the singing of the stones. It is theorized that by striking or vibrating the granite and limestone blocks at their natural resonant frequencies, the builders could reduce the friction between the stone and the transport sledges. This acoustic lubrication would make a 1,000-pound weight feel as light as a feather, moving with a grace that defies our modern expectations of manual labor. The implications of this technology extend beyond the movement of stones. They reach into the very efficiency of the human spirit. Sound has a profound biological effect on the human body. Specific frequencies can induce a state of heightened focus, reduce physical fatigue, and synchronize the movements of a large group of people. In a rhythmic, sonic environment, a workforce becomes a single, cohesive organism, moving in perfect harmony with the pulse of the earth. By weaving these sonic threads into the fabric of their construction, the ancients didn't just build a pyramid, they orchestrated a symphony of engineering. They understood that the world is not just made of matter, but of frequency. They didn't fight against the desert. They commanded its particles to yield, turning the very floor of the world into a moving walkway of liquid sand. It was a secret technology of the air and the earth, a lost science that allowed the immovable to move, guided by the invisible hand of sound. But what if the true mastery of these builders lay not just in the movement of stone, but in the invisible blueprint of the universe itself? Beyond the acoustic manipulation of the sand lies a deeper mystery, etched into the very layout of the construction sites. When we analyze the proportions of these massive structures, we find that they were not designed by whim or simple aesthetic preference. Instead, they were engineered according to a specific geometric ratio that seems to mirror the underlying architecture of reality. This is the realm of sacred geometry, a profound belief that mathematical constants are the language of the divine, the literal blueprints of creation. At the forefront of this mathematical harmony is the presence of the phi proportion, commonly known as the golden ratio. This number, which appears infinitely in the spiral of a seashell, the growth of a leaf, and the proportions of the human body, is woven into the very dimensions of the pyramid's base and height. To the ancient architects, phi was likely more than a mere number. It was a bridge between the terrestrial and the celestial. By incorporating this ratio into their construction sites, they were aligning their monuments with the natural growth patterns of the living world, creating a physical echo of life's inherent design. Linked inextricably to this is the concept of squaring the circle. This ancient mathematical challenge involves constructing a square with the same area as a circle, a feat that symbolizes the union of the earthly and the infinite. In the layout of the pyramid sites, we see an obsession with this reconciliation. The builders sought to manifest the perfection of the sphere within the stability of the cube, attempting to capture a complete totality of form. This was not merely an engineering goal, but a philosophical pursuit to ground the heavens into the earth, making the abstract tangible through the precision of stone. Furthermore, the site layout reveals a striking fractal nature. Just as a single branch of a tree reflects the structure of the entire tree, the proportions of the smaller chambers and corridors mirror the grander dimensions of the exterior structure. This repetition of form at different scales suggests that the ancients viewed the world as a series of nested symmetries. They understood that the microcosm and the macrocosm are one and the same. By replicating these fractal patterns in their architecture, they were creating a resonant space where the small and the great could coexist in perfect balance. Ultimately, these ratios represent a profound philosophical connection between mathematics and divinity. To these builders, math was the holy scripture of the universe. They believed that by constructing their monuments using these specific geometric keys, they were tapping into a universal frequency. The site plan was a mathematical hymn, a way to harmonize the structure with the fundamental laws of existence. They weren't just building a tomb or a temple. They were constructing a geometric anchor, a place where the laws of the cosmos were made visible to the human eye, ensuring that their work would vibrate in eternal sympathy with the heartbeat of the universe. And yet, as we stand before these geometrically perfect monuments, we are confronted by a silence that feels intentional, a profound stillness emanating from the corridors that lead into the heart of the stone. What was the purpose of the internal chambers that remain sealed to this day? For centuries, the mainstream narrative has suggested these spaces were merely funerary chambers or storage vaults, yet the sheer sophistication of their construction suggests a far more complex and clandestine utility. One of the most compelling theories suggests these rooms served as sophisticated time capsules, not merely for the preservation of physical bodies, but for the safeguarding of high-level data. In an era before digital storage, how did an advanced civilization preserve the essential blueprints of their knowledge? These sealed chambers may have been designed to shield specific archives from the decay of time and the elements, housing information that was deemed too sensitive or too sacred for the public eye. They were vaults of thought, preserving the software of a civilization that may have been destined to vanish. Beyond the preservation of data, there is the startling possibility that these chambers functioned as zero-point energy hubs. If the pyramids were indeed terrestrial antennas, as some hypothesize, then the internal rooms would serve as the focal points where this energy was concentrated and harnessed. By utilizing the specific mineral compositions of the granite and limestone, the builders may have created resonance cavities. In these spaces, sound and vibration were not just acoustic phenomena, but tools of power. When a specific frequency of energy is trapped within a perfectly proportioned stone chamber, it can create a standing wave, potentially generating a localized field of high-frequency energy. This brings us to the mystery of high-frequency artifacts. It is theorized that these rooms were designed to contain and amplify objects that reacted to specific electromagnetic signatures. These artifacts, perhaps tools of medicine, communication, or even propulsion, would have required an environment of extreme isolation to function correctly. The heavy granite walls were not just structural. They were shielding, preventing the leakage of these frequencies and ensuring that the power remained contained within the geometric heart of the pyramid. Furthermore, we must consider the ritualistic purpose of isolation. In many ancient cultures, the transition from the mundane to the divine required a space of absolute silence. These chambers may have been designed as sensory deprivation zones, where the inhabitants could disconnect from the terrestrial world to achieve a state of heightened consciousness. By isolating the individual from all external stimuli, the chamber became a laboratory for the human spirit, a place where the internal resonance of the body could be synchronized with the external resonance of the pyramid. Every sealed door and every blocked passage points toward a deliberate act of concealment. Whether they were meant to house the remnants of a biological legacy, the secrets of a lost science, or the engines of a forgotten power, these chambers remain the ultimate locked doors of human history. They stand as silent witnesses to a technology that worked in harmony with the earth, waiting for a key that has been lost to the sands of time. But even if we accept the presence of these sealed vaults of knowledge, a more practical mystery remains on the surface of the monuments themselves. How did the workers maintain such perfect precision without modern tools? When we examine the base of the Great Pyramid, we find a level of accuracy that challenges our contemporary understanding of manual engineering. The foundation is leveled to within a fraction of an inch across a massive area, a feat that requires more than just a steady hand. To achieve this, the ancient architects likely mastered the art of water-level leveling. By constructing a series of interconnected channels or trenches, they could allow water to flow across the construction site. Because water always seeks its own level, it provided a perfect horizontal datum line. By marking the water's surface against the stone, They could ensure that every block was laid in perfect horizontal alignment, creating a foundation that would not shift or tilt over millennia. This horizontal precision was mirrored by an extraordinary vertical alignment. The builders did not simply face the structures toward the nearest landmark. Instead, they utilized stellar observation to orient the pyramids with breathtaking accuracy toward the cardinal points of the compass. By tracking the movements of specific stars and the transit of celestial bodies, they could establish a true north that was consistent with the movements of the cosmos. This celestial surveying allowed them to align the massive structures with a precision that remains a marvel to modern geodetic engineers. Once the orientation was set, the focus shifted to the individual stones. The production of perfectly squared blocks required a mastery of geometry and abrasive technology. The ancients used geometric templates, likely made of harder stone or wood, to ensure that every face of a block was perfectly perpendicular to its neighbor. These templates acted as a universal standard, ensuring that thousands of different workers could produce identical results. To achieve the mirror-like finish found on the casing stones, they employed abrasive powders, such as crushed quartz or emery. These powders, used in conjunction with grinding stones, allowed the builders to polish the surface of the rock until it was smooth enough to reflect the desert sun. The consistency of this work was not an accident of individual skill, but the result of a rigorous master mason apprenticeship system. Knowledge was not scattered, it was curated. Master builders would oversee generations of apprentices, passing down the secrets of stone cutting and measurement through a structured lineage of craft. This ensured that the sacred ratios and geometric keys were preserved with absolute fidelity from one generation to the next. Through the combination of water leveling, stellar alignment, geometric templates, and a disciplined system of apprenticeship, the ancients transformed raw stone into a symphony of mathematical perfection. They did not have lasers or GPS, yet they possessed a deeper understanding of the physical world, allowing them to carve the earth into a testament of infinite precision. And yet, even if the precision of the masonry was a triumph of human geometry, it leaves us haunted by a more visceral question. What ritualistic sacrifices were performed to animate the stones? Beyond the physical movement of granite and the mathematical perfection of the layout, we must consider the possibility that the construction was not merely a feat of engineering, but a profound act of spiritual transmutation. To the ancients, a pyramid was not a static monument of dead rock. It was a living entity, a colossal body that required a soul to function. This belief led to the practice of blood binding. It is theorized that during the placement of the foundational stones, the builders performed ceremonies designed to weave the life force of living beings into the very mineral structure of the building. This was not seen as a loss of life, but as a necessary dedication of energy. By offering a biological spark, the architects believed they were waking up the stone, transforming inert limestone into a conductive medium capable of holding and projecting spiritual power. The blood served as a bridge, a chemical and spiritual adhesive that bonded the terrestrial material to the ethereal realm. In the shadow of these massive structures, the role of the priest-engineers became paramount. These were not merely architects in the modern sense, they were high priests of resonance who understood that every stone had a voice. They were tasked with ensuring that the living energy of the sacrifice was correctly channeled through the structure's internal geometry. They performed rites of consecration at the foundation, where the first stones were laid, effectively birthing the pyramid into existence. During these ceremonies, the site would have been saturated with incense, rhythmic chanting, and the heavy, copper scent of sacrifice, creating an atmosphere where the veil between worlds was intentionally thinned. Perhaps the most profound and unsettling aspect of this process was the symbolic sacrifice of the architect. In many esoteric traditions, the creator must become one with the creation. It is whispered that the master designer of a pyramid might undergo a ritual of transition, essentially dying to their old identity to become the eternal spirit of the structure. Their consciousness was believed to merge with the blueprint, ensuring that the pyramid would forever vibrate in sympathy with their intent. When we look at these monuments today, we are not looking at mere construction. We are looking at a massive, petrified prayer. Every block was consecrated, every corridor was an artery of energy, and every chamber was a heartbeat. The ancients did not want to build a tomb, they wanted to build a body. They sought to create a vessel so spiritually charged that it could act as a conduit for the divine, a structure that breathed with the collective life force of those who gave themselves to its birth. They understood that to move the earth, one must first move the spirit, and that the truest power lies in the sacred exchange of life for eternity. Imagine for a moment that the Great Pyramid is not merely a tomb of stone, but a silent, frozen symphony of the cosmos written in the language of mathematics. To the untrained eye, it is a monument of staggering scale, yet to the seeker of hidden truths, it reveals itself as a sophisticated cosmogram, a physical blueprint of our entire solar system encoded into its very dimensions. When we look at the proportions of the Great Pyramid, we are not looking at arbitrary measurements. Instead, we find a deliberate representation of planetary distances and the orbital periods of the celestial bodies that govern our world. The ancients did not just build a structure, they captured the movements of the heavens and anchored them into the earth. By examining the ratios of the pyramid's base and height, researchers have discovered that the structure mirrors the mathematical unity of the solar system. It suggests that the architects viewed the universe not as a collection of random objects, but as a single, interconnected organism governed by universal constants. One of the most profound revelations lies in the encoding of the Earth's circumference. The dimensions of the pyramid appear to relate directly to the spherical measurements of our planet, suggesting that the builders possessed a mastery of geodesy that predates modern exploration by millennia. They were able to shrink the vast scale of the world into a geometric form, creating a microcosm where the macrocosm of the Earth could be understood through the lens of sacred geometry. Furthermore, the inclusion of planetary orbital periods within the structure's measurements points toward a deep, esoteric knowledge of time. The pyramid serves as a clock of the spheres, where the distance between the stones and the angles of the faces reflect the rhythmic cycles of the planets. It is as if the builders wanted to ensure that even if human records were lost, the truth of the solar system's mechanics would remain etched in stone forever. This concept of the cosmogram suggests that the pyramid was intended to be a bridge between the terrestrial and the celestial. By creating a structure that functions as a mathematical map, the ancient architects were effectively creating a mirror of the heavens on the ground. They were distilling the infinite complexity of the universe into a singular, harmonious geometric shape. In this way, the pyramid is a testament to a lost era of science, where mathematics was not just a tool for calculation, but a spiritual pathway to understanding the divine order of the stars. Every block, every angle, and every measurement whispers a secret about our place in the galaxy, inviting us to see the Great Pyramid as a profound, stone-wrought map of the very universe we inhabit. But if the pyramid is a map of the cosmos, one must ask how a civilization without satellites or modern computers could possibly grasp the staggering scale of our entire planet. To understand this, we must peel back the layers of time and explore the advanced geodesy of the ancients, a science that allowed them to perceive the Earth not as a flat expanse, but as a measurable sphere. They did not merely guess at the world's dimensions, they calculated them with a precision that remains staggering to modern observers. The key to this mastery lies in the very foundation of the Great Pyramid. When we analyze the perimeter of the base in relation to its height, we find a mathematical bridge to the planet's scale. The builders utilized a sophisticated system of proportions where the pyramid's base acts as a symbolic representation of the Earth's circumference. By applying a specific geometric constant, the dimensions of the structure suggest they knew the exact measurement of the globe, effectively shrinking the massive scale of the world into a manageable, stone-wrought microcosm. This was not a coincidence of construction, but a deliberate act of planetary encoding. How did they achieve such accuracy without the tools of the modern era? The answer lies in the masterful use of shadows and gnomons. By observing the movement of a vertical pillar, or gnomon, across the desert sands, the ancients could track the sun's path with absolute fidelity. By measuring the length and angle of the shadow at specific points in the year, they were able to calculate the arc of the horizon. This allowed them to determine the curvature of the Earth and, by extension, its radius. They were measuring the tilt of the world against the arc of the sky, translating the movement of light into the hard data of geometry. This was not a localized observation, but a systematic collection of global geographic data. The architects were able to transmit these measurements across vast distances, ensuring that the knowledge of the Earth's sphere was a shared truth among the elite keepers of wisdom. They developed a method to calculate the radius of the planet by observing the way the horizon dipped and the way shadows elongated over great distances. They understood that the Earth was a finite, spherical body, a fact they proved through the rigorous application of trigonometry long before the words for those concepts were even written in modern textbooks. By anchoring these measurements into the pyramid, the builders provided a mathematical proof of a spherical Earth. They took the vast, invisible curve of our world and gave it a physical shape. They proved that the planet was a sphere by manifesting its circumference in the very stones that stand before us today. It is a silent declaration of their sophistication, a testament to a time when humanity had already mastered the secrets of the globe, turning the entire planet into a geometric equation that could be solved by anyone who knew how to read the stones. And yet, if we have mastered the dimensions of the planet within these stones, we must confront an even more profound mystery that bridges the gap between terrestrial geometry and the fundamental laws of the universe itself. Beyond the circumference of the Earth lies a numerical correlation that feels less like a coincidence and more like a deliberate transmission of cosmic data. When we turn our attention to the height of the Great Pyramid and its relationship to the velocity of light, we begin to see the structure not just as a map of space, but as a monument to the speed of information. Consider the staggering precision required to align a physical structure with a universal constant. Some researchers have pointed toward a startling numerical alignment where the height of the pyramid, when expressed in specific units of measurement, mirrors the numerical value of the speed of light. It is as if the architects were using the pyramid as a physical anchor for a light speed constant. In this view, the pyramid is not just a building, but a scale model of the universe's fundamental pulse. By encoding the speed of light into the very apex of the structure, the builders may have been signaling their understanding of the maximum speed at which any piece of information or energy can travel through the vacuum of space. This suggests a symbolic representation of the speed of information. To the ancients, light was likely seen as the primary carrier of the divine word, the fastest medium by which the cosmos communicates with itself. By building a structure that reflects this speed, they were honoring the limit of the universe's connectivity. It implies that the pyramid was intended to function as a terrestrial beacon, a point of reference where the finite world of man meets the infinite speed of the cosmos. Deepening this mystery is the relationship between these dimensions and the fine structure constant. This is one of the fundamental constants of physics, a dimensionless number that characterizes the strength of the electromagnetic interaction between elementary charged particles. It is a number that appears in the very fabric of atoms and the behavior of light. The fact that the pyramid's proportions seem to dance around these fundamental physical constants suggests that the builders were not merely architects of stone, but architects of the very laws of physics. This leads us to the universal constant theory. This theory proposes that the pyramid was designed to reflect a unified field of knowledge where geometry, light, and atomic structure converge. The builders may have understood that the universe is governed by a set of unchanging numbers that dictate the behavior of everything from the smallest electron to the largest galaxy. By etching these constants into the Great Pyramid, they ensured that the blueprint of reality would remain preserved in the desert sands. The pyramid becomes a repository of the universe's source code, a stone-wrought testament to a time when humanity understood the fundamental frequencies of existence. It is a message written in the language of light, telling us that the secrets of the stars are already encoded in the earth beneath our feet. But if these stones are indeed a repository of the universe's source code, we must ask why the very veins of the structure point toward the heavens with such haunting precision. Beyond the external geometry of the faces lies a deeper, internal mystery found within the narrow passages that pierce the heart of the monument. These corridors are not mere hallways for movement. They are sophisticated astronomical instruments designed to align perfectly with the belt of Orion. This phenomenon is central to the Orion correlation theory, which suggests that the three primary stars of Orion's belt serve as a celestial blueprint for the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. When we map the layout of the Great Pyramid against the night sky, the alignment becomes undeniable. The interior corridors act as a spiritual and physical conduit, directing the observer's gaze toward the three stars that anchor the hunter's belt. To the ancients, this was not a mere coincidence of placement, but a deliberate creation of a celestial gateway. By aligning the architecture with these specific stars, the builders were attempting to bridge the divide between the mortal realm and the infinite expanse of the cosmos. In this sacred geometry, the pyramid functions as a lens. Just as a glass lens focuses light to a single point, these corridors were designed to focus human consciousness toward the stars. They create a corridor of transition, a path where the terrestrial world is filtered through the perspective of the heavens. This mirroring of the stars on Earth suggests that the pyramids were intended to be a terrestrial reflection of the celestial order. By bringing the heavens down into the stone, the architects ensured that the movements of the stars were permanently anchored into the geography of our world. This alignment also speaks to the spiritual journey of the soul. Many scholars believe these corridors were intended to facilitate a symbolic passage for the deceased, mimicking the movement of the stars themselves. In this esoteric tradition, the soul does not merely end its journey at the grave. Instead, it travels through the celestial gateway, following the path of the stars into the afterlife. The corridor becomes a roadmap for the spirit, a way to navigate the transition from the physical body to the cosmic expanse. Furthermore, this celestial alignment is intrinsically linked to the Great Sphinx. The Sphinx stands as the silent guardian of the plateau, its gaze fixed perpetually toward the eastern horizon. When we consider the orientation of the pyramids in relation to the Sphinx's gaze, a unified narrative emerges. The Sphinx watches over the gateway, while the pyramids provide the map for the journey. Together, they form a cohesive complex of sacred engineering, where the earth, the stone, and the stars converge into a single, unified vision of the divine. The interior corridors are the final piece of this puzzle, the literal and metaphorical veins of a structure that allows humanity to peer into the very heart of the heavens. And yet, if these internal corridors serve as a physical bridge to the stars, we must now turn our gaze toward the most intimate and enigmatic sanctum of the entire structure. Hidden within the heavy, echoing silence of the king's chamber, there exists a mystery that transcends mere architecture. It lies within the granite inscriptions, a series of markings that appear to be more than mere decorative text. To the casual observer, they may seem like weathered remnants of a lost tongue, but to the cryptographer of the esoteric, they represent a sophisticated linguistic encoding, a vault of data protected by layers of ancient security. The mystery begins with the use of what many scholars describe as lost hieroglyphics. These are not the standard scripts found on the exterior walls of the complex. Instead, they are characterized by a nuanced complexity that suggests a private, high-level dialect reserved only for the most initiated. This is a system of linguistic encoding where the meaning is not found in the literal representation of the symbols, but in the spatial relationship between them. Each character acts as a variable in a larger, silent equation. When we analyze the frequency of specific symbols within these granite walls, a startling pattern emerges. Certain signs repeat with a mathematical regularity that mirrors the orbital resonance of the planets. This is the linguistic encoding of solar cycles. The inscriptions do not merely describe the sun, they map its movements. By counting the repetitions of specific glyphs, one can derive the exact number of days in a solar year or the precise tilt of the Earth's axis. The builders were using the granite as a permanent hard drive, etching the heartbeat of the solar system into the very bones of the chamber. To unlock this message, one must identify the hidden mathematical variables. The inscriptions utilize a system of key words. These are specific anchor points in the text that, when decoded, provide the formula for the rest of the passage. Think of it as a cryptographic key. Without the correct starting word, the surrounding text remains a jumble of meaningless shapes. Once the key is turned, the granite begins to speak. The symbols shift from mere pictures into a complex series of coordinates, providing a step-by-step guide to the mechanics of time and space. Beyond the math, there are the hidden philosophical commands. These are the most profound secrets of all. They are not instructions for a king, but commands for the human consciousness. These inscriptions appear to be a manual for the transmutation of the self. They provide a sequence of mental states required to align the human spirit with the cosmic frequencies we have discussed throughout this journey. They are instructions on how to perceive the unseen, how to hear the music of the spheres, and how to step through the gateway of the stars. The king's chamber is not a room of death. It is a room of initiation, where the granite serves as the final, encoded map for the evolution of the human mind. But if the king's chamber serves as a vault for the evolution of the human mind, we must ask how these intellectual blueprints were intended to be physically activated by the very architecture of the pyramid itself. Beyond the linguistic keys etched in granite lies a deeper, more profound mystery concerning the pyramid's role as a spiritual conduit. We must move beyond the idea of the pyramid as a static building and begin to view it as a functional machine, a sophisticated technology designed to facilitate the transition from the physical to the ethereal. At the heart of this mystery is the concept of the axis mundi, the world pillar. In many ancient cosmologies, the axis mundi represents the central pole of the universe, the singular point where the heavens and the earth intersect. By constructing the pyramid with such rigorous geometric precision, the architects were attempting to manifest a physical axis mundi on the terrestrial plane. They were creating a vertical corridor of power, a point of singularity where the veil between dimensions becomes thin. This brings us to the theory of the thin places, the idea that certain geographical locations possess a naturally higher permeability between our world and the divine. The builders did not choose the Giza Plateau by accident. They identified a site where the fabric of reality was already strained, and they used the pyramid to anchor and amplify that thinning of the veil. The pyramid, then, serves as a machine for ascension. It was designed to facilitate a systematic shift in frequency, moving a conscious entity from the dense, heavy vibrations of the earth into the high-frequency, ethereal state of the divine. This is where the spiritual geometry of the apex becomes paramount. The point at the very top of the structure is not merely a peak, it is a focal point for spiritual energy. In sacred geometry, the apex represents the unity of the one and the many, the point where all divergent lines of human experience converge into a single divine spark. It is the needle of a compass, pointing toward the source of all creation. By standing at the base and looking toward the summit, or by passing through the internal chambers toward the stars, the seeker is invited to participate in a process of refinement. The structure acts as a stabilizer for the world's balance, a spiritual lightning rod that grounds the celestial energies into the earth while simultaneously offering a path for the soul to rise above. It is a bridge of dual purpose, ensuring that the terrestrial realm remains anchored to the divine order, while providing the necessary machinery for the human spirit to transcend its physical limitations. In this sacred architecture, the pyramid is the ultimate bridge, a stone-wrought gateway where the finite meets the infinite, and where the seeker finally steps across the threshold into the eternal. Imagine a world where the very ground beneath your feet serves as a living battery, waiting for a key that was lost to the sands of time. To understand the true purpose of the pyramids, we must step beyond the veil of conventional archaeology and peer into the realm of theoretical ancient energetics. For decades, researchers and enthusiasts have whispered about a lost power source, a method of generating immense energy that left no smoke, no waste, and no visible machinery. They call it the lost power, the hidden pulse that supposedly fueled the internal mechanisms of these colossal stone giants. One of the most compelling theories suggests that the ancients did not generate power through combustion or chemical reactions, but rather by tapping into the fabric of reality itself. This is known as zero-point energy. Proponents of this theory argue that the pyramids were designed to harvest the background fluctuations of the vacuum, the infinite energy that exists in every cubic inch of space. By using the specific geometry of the limestone and granite, the structures may have acted as resonators, capturing these microscopic fluctuations and magnifying them into a usable, coherent flow of power. But where did this energy come from if not the vacuum? Some believe the builders looked downward, toward the molten heart of our planet. By identifying specific geological anomalies, these architects may have discovered a way to harness the Earth's core heat. They did not use pipes or wires. Instead, they may have used the pyramid's massive weight and unique mineral composition to create a thermal gradient, drawing heat from the deep crust and converting it into a steady stream of kinetic or electrical force. Then, there is the fascinating concept of mineral transmutation. Some theorists suggest that the specific arrangement of stones allowed for the conversion of minerals directly into electricity. By placing high quartz content stones in precise patterns, the pyramids may have functioned as massive piezoelectric transducers. When the Earth shifted or the atmosphere changed, the pressure on the stones would generate a constant electrical discharge, powering the internal chambers and perhaps even the very air within them. Perhaps the most ethereal theory involves the use of etheric energy. This suggests that the pyramids were tuned to the ether, a subtle substance that some ancient philosophies believed permeated the entire universe. In this view, the pyramid was a machine designed to bridge the gap between our physical world and the unseen dimensions, pulling energy from the spirit of the cosmos to maintain the structural integrity and spiritual resonance of the site. To facilitate this, some believe the foundations of the pyramids contained hidden batteries. These were not made of lead and acid, but were instead massive, subterranean caches of highly conductive ores, acting as capacitors to store and release energy in rhythmic waves. This would create a wireless power grid, a network of energy that moved through the very stones themselves. Imagine a world where power did not travel through wires, but radiated outward from the monument, providing a constant, invisible hum of vitality to the surrounding civilization. But if these structures were indeed machines designed to channel and conduct immense flows of energy, we must ask ourselves why the very stones used to build them appear to be fused together in a way that defies our modern understanding of masonry. When we look closely at the massive blocks of the Great Pyramid, we find a staggering absence of traditional chemical mortar. In most ancient constructions, the space between stones is filled with a binding agent, a slurry of lime or clay designed to hold the weight. Yet, in these monuments, the joints are so incredibly tight that they are often described as seamless. They do not merely sit next to one another, they appear to be part of a single, continuous piece of stone. This brings us to a profound mystery found within the microscopic analysis of the stone surfaces. When researchers examine the interface where two massive blocks meet, they do not always find the crumbling remains of a dried adhesive. Instead, they find evidence of what some theorists describe as molecular interlocking. This is the suggestion that the two surfaces were modified at a subatomic level, allowing the limestone molecules to bond directly with their neighbors. Imagine two pieces of wood that, when pressed together, become a single piece of timber. On a molecular scale, this would mean the very lattice of the stone was merged, creating a structural integrity that is virtually impossible to replicate with simple manual labor. How could such a feat be achieved thousands of years before the invention of modern lasers or high-frequency industrial tools? This leads us to the provocative theory of ultrasonic welding. This process involves using high-frequency sound waves to create intense vibrations, which can cause the surface molecules of two materials to heat up and fuse instantly. If the ancients mastered the ability to generate specific acoustic frequencies, they could have literally vibrated the stones into a state of molecular cohesion. By using sound as a tool of construction, they could have bypassed the need for mortar entirely, creating a monolithic structure that functions as a unified conductor. This theory aligns perfectly with the idea of the pyramids as energy resonators. A structure held together by molecular bonding would possess a different conductivity than one held together by mortar. If the stones are fused at the molecular level, the entire pyramid becomes a singular, cohesive circuit. There would be no microscopic gaps for energy to leak out, no structural weaknesses where resistance could build up. The stones would not just be a wall, they would be a unified medium for the flow of power. By studying the microscopic irregularities and the lack of traditional binding agents, we begin to see a level of advanced material science that suggests a mastery over the very fabric of matter. The builders were not just moving rocks, they were engineering the atomic behavior of the earth itself. They were weaving stone together like a tapestry of molecules, ensuring that the Great Pyramid remained not just a tomb, but a perfectly integrated machine of immense, silent power. And yet, if these stones were indeed engineered to function as a unified circuit, we must confront the staggering question of how the ancients achieved the impossible smoothness of the exterior casing. To the modern eye, the remaining fragments of the outer limestone appear less like quarried rock and more like polished glass, possessing a level of refinement that seems to defy the limitations of copper and stone tools. This was not merely a matter of aesthetic vanity. The exterior was designed to be a perfect, frictionless surface, a necessity for a structure intended to interact with the very elements of the atmosphere. To achieve this mirror finish, the builders likely employed high-speed polishing wheels, massive discs of harder stone, or dense wood rotated with immense force. By applying these wheels against the limestone, they could grind away the microscopic irregularities of the quarry face, gradually refining the surface until it reached a state of near-perfect planar symmetry. This process would require a level of mechanical consistency that suggests an advanced understanding of friction and torque, allowing the artisans to flatten surfaces to within a fraction of a millimeter over dozens of feet. Beyond mechanical grinding, some researchers point toward the sophisticated use of chemical smoothing agents. It is theorized that the ancients may have utilized acidic solutions or alkaline washes to chemically etch and soften the surface of the limestone. By applying these agents in a controlled manner, they could have dissolved the softer minerals within the stone, creating a surface that was structurally homogeneous and exceptionally flat. This chemical preparation would have provided the perfect canvas for the final stage of refinement. One of the most compelling possibilities involves the use of diamond dust abrasives. Even in antiquity, the knowledge of how to create a slurry of incredibly hard minerals could have been utilized. By suspending microscopic particles of abrasive minerals in a liquid medium, the builders could have buffed the stones to a sheen that reflects light with startling clarity. This would create a mirror finish, where the pyramid would not just stand in the sun but appear to glow, reflecting the desert landscape back upon itself in a dazzling display of geometric perfection. To further enhance this brilliance, the builders may have employed heat treating of the stone surfaces. By applying intense, localized heat to the exterior casing, they could have caused the minerals to expand and settle into a more compact, dense crystalline structure. This process would effectively fire the surface of the stone, sealing it against the elements and creating a surface that was both harder and smoother than the interior blocks. The ultimate purpose of this polished surface was not merely to please the eye. In a structure designed for resonance, a smooth exterior minimizes turbulence and ensures a uniform distribution of energy across the facade. The casing stones acted as a protective skin, a polished membrane that allowed the pyramid to interact with light and wind with absolute precision. It was a masterpiece of material science, where the stone was transformed from a raw piece of the earth into a sophisticated, shimmering conductor of the divine. But if the pyramid's polished skin was designed to interact with the atmosphere, we must then ask what purpose the narrow, mysterious shafts served within its heart. These are not merely vents for air or architectural flourishes. They are precisely engineered conduits that point toward specific celestial bodies, suggesting a function that is simultaneously biological, astronomical, and spiritual. To understand their role, we must first look at the concept of the pyramid as a living organism. Some researchers suggest these shafts were designed for air circulation to facilitate a process of recharging the stone. By allowing the atmosphere to flow through the internal chambers, the structure could maintain a state of constant ionic exchange. This flow of air might have prevented the stagnation of energy, ensuring that the limestone and granite remained active and capable of sustaining the pyramid's resonance. Beyond the physical movement of air, these shafts served as sophisticated light conduits for specific solar and stellar events. During certain moments of the year, the sun's rays would travel down these passages, striking the interior walls at exact angles to illuminate specific chambers. This was not a random occurrence, but a calculated synchronization with the solar cycle, potentially acting as a cosmic clock or a way to feed the internal chambers with concentrated photons. However, the most profound secrets lie in the shaft's alignment with the stars. These passages do not point randomly. They are aimed at specific points in the heavens, such as Sirius and Alpha Draconis. By pointing toward these distant systems, the pyramids may have functioned as a celestial bridge. In many ancient belief systems, the soul was seen as a traveler that required a map to navigate the afterlife. These shafts may have served as a spiritual path for the soul, acting as a literal and metaphorical highway that guided the essence of the deceased toward the stars. They were the umbilical cords connecting the terrestrial tomb to the celestial destination, ensuring that the spirit reached its intended constellation with unerring accuracy. There is also a fascinating theory regarding the acoustic focus of these shafts. Given the pyramid's role as an energy resonator, these narrow passages could have been designed to funnel and amplify specific frequencies. By shaping the air and stone to create a natural acoustic chamber, the builders may have been able to produce a standing wave of sound. When a specific frequency hit the apex of the structure, these shafts could have carried that vibration deep into the earth, creating a hum that resonated through the very foundations. This was a mastery of the unseen, where the pyramid became a musical instrument of cosmic proportions, vibrating in harmony with the heartbeat of the universe. Through these shafts, the ancients were not just looking at the stars. They were inviting the stars to speak into the very bones of the earth. And yet, while the shafts provided the pathway for celestial signals, we must consider the very bones of the monument. For the builders did not choose their materials by accident or mere aesthetic preference. Every stone selected for the Great Pyramid was a deliberate choice of material science, where the mineral properties of limestone, granite, and basalt served as specific components in a complex, multifunctional machine. To understand this, we must move beyond the idea of the pyramid as a mere pile of rocks and see it as a sophisticated circuit board, where each stone was assigned a unique structural and energetic role based on its inherent physical properties. Let us begin with the limestone, the very soul of the pyramid's bulk. While it may seem like a common building material, the ancients understood its unique acoustic resonance. Limestone is porous and possesses a specific density that allows it to vibrate at frequencies that other stones simply cannot sustain. By using limestone for the primary mass, the builders created a gargantuan sounding board. This material acted as a medium that could capture and amplify the subtle hum of the earth, allowing the entire structure to vibrate in sympathy with the planet's natural frequencies. It was the acoustic amplifier of the monument, turning the pyramid into a giant resonator. In stark contrast, the builders utilized granite, particularly within the king's chamber, for its extraordinary electrical conductivity and compressive strength. Granite is rich in quartz crystals, which possess piezoelectric properties. When subjected to the immense pressure of the pyramid's weight, these crystals generate a constant, low-level electrical discharge. In this sense, the granite functioned as a massive, solid-state battery or a transformer. It was chosen for the most sacred spaces because it could withstand the stresses of the structure while simultaneously acting as a conductor, facilitating the movement of energy through the internal heart of the monument. Then, there is the heavy, dense presence of basalt. Chosen for its incredible thermal mass and durability, basalt served as the stabilizing anchor. Because it retains heat with such intensity, it could act as a thermal regulator, maintaining a consistent temperature within the deeper foundations, regardless of the harsh desert fluctuations outside. This thermal stability ensured that the internal environment remained constant, preventing the expansion or contraction of the more delicate limestone, and allowing the energy flow to remain steady and uninterrupted. Finally, we must observe the intentional dichotomy between the aesthetic and the functional. The smooth, white limestone casing was the skin, designed to interact with light and air, while the interior stones were the organs, designed to interact with electricity, sound, and heat. The builders were not merely stacking stones, they were layering different mineral properties to create a masterpiece of engineering. They understood that for a machine to function, every part must serve a purpose. By balancing the acoustic resonance of limestone, the electrical conductivity of granite, and the thermal mass of basalt, they crafted a structure that was not just a tomb, but a living, breathing conduit of terrestrial and celestial power. But if these materials were engineered to form a unified circuit, we must finally confront the ultimate question of what occurs when a specific frequency of sound hits the apex of the structure. Imagine a singular, pure note, a frequency so precise it aligns with the molecular vibration of the granite and limestone, traveling upward through the tapering geometry of the monument. As this sound reaches the very tip, the pyramid ceases to be a static object of stone and begins to behave as a massive acoustic resonator. Because of the structure's specific proportions, the sound waves do not simply dissipate. They reflect back into the interior, colliding with incoming waves to create a phenomenon known as standing waves. These are stationary patterns of high and low pressure that hang in the air like invisible architecture, concentrated by the narrowing corridors and amplified by the massive interior chambers. Within these sealed rooms, the air itself begins to thrum. The resonance of the internal chambers becomes so intense that the very molecules of the atmosphere are forced into a state of high-frequency agitation. This is where the transition from sound to motion occurs. Through a process of acoustic levitation and kinetic transmutation, the vibration is converted into tangible kinetic energy. The stones themselves begin to sing, a low-frequency hum that can be felt in the chest more than it is heard by the ears. This is the pinnacle of ancient acoustic engineering, where the pyramid acts as a transducer, turning a sonic input into a physical pulse that radiates through the foundations. The implications of this resonance are staggering, potentially reaching a threshold where the vibration influences the local environment. Some theorists suggest that at a specific peak frequency, the sheer intensity of the standing waves could lead to localized gravity fluctuations. By manipulating the density of the air and the vibrational state of the mineral lattice, the ancients may have discovered a way to subtly alter the weight of the space within the chambers, creating a zone where the laws of physics feel momentarily suspended. It is the ultimate expression of the pyramid as a machine, a device capable of warping the immediate reality of its interior. Beyond the physics of the structure lies the profound spiritual experience of high-frequency resonance. To stand within the heart of the pyramid during such an event would be to enter a state of profound neurological synchronization. High-frequency vibrations have the power to entrain the human brain, moving the observer into a state of heightened awareness or deep meditative trance. The singing of the apex was not just a feat of engineering. It was a gateway to an altered state of consciousness. It was a way to vibrate the human spirit in harmony with the stone, the earth, and the stars, allowing the individual to experience a direct, sonic communion with the cosmos. The pyramid, in its final form, was a masterpiece of sensory engineering, turning the silent desert into a cathedral of invisible, vibrating power. Imagine a world where the greatest achievements of humanity were not celebrated in the light of day, but were deliberately swallowed by the shadows of the earth. For centuries, the great monuments of the ancient world stood as towering beacons of power. But then, in a heartbeat of geological time, the construction stopped. The hammers fell silent, the blueprints were burned, and the very structures that once defined a civilization began to vanish from the public consciousness. To understand this abrupt shift in historical trajectory, we must look beyond simple war or famine. We must consider the possibility of a catastrophic event, not merely a physical disaster, but a spiritual and technological reckoning. Some theories suggest that the civilization reached a point of peak resonance where the technology they wielded began to interact with the planet in ways they could no longer control. They realized that their structures were not just monuments, but active nodes of energy. When the risk of a global imbalance became too great, a collective decision was made to withdraw. This was the era of the Great Concealment. The fear of the revelation became a driving force for a people who realized that their secrets were too dangerous for the masses to possess. They chose to pivot away from the terrestrial expansion of their architecture and toward a subterranean culture. They moved their focus inward, literally and figuratively, carving out sanctuaries beneath the surface where the core of their knowledge could be shielded from the prying eyes of a changing world. This transition was not an act of surrender, but one of preservation. By hiding the structures, they were ensuring that the technology remained intact, protected from the entropy of time and the interference of those who would misuse it. The pyramids and their sister structures were transitioned into a state of dormancy. They became sleeping giants, nodes of power left in a state of hibernation, waiting for a time when humanity might be ready to interface with them again. There was a spiritual closing of the era, a deliberate sealing of the gates. The builders ceased their outward expansion because they had completed the work of the terrestrial plane. They moved the great work into a hidden dimension of practice, where the blueprints were no longer etched in stone, but encoded in the very frequency of the earth. The structures were left behind as anchors, remaining as dormant keys in a lock that had been turned. As the dust of the ancient world settled, the truth was tucked away behind veils of myth and mystery. The civilization did not die. It simply relocated its focus, choosing to bury their greatest secrets beneath the sand and the soil. They left us with these silent sentinels as a testament to a time when humanity walked the line between the physical and the divine, choosing to hide the bridge before the world was ready to cross it. But if the truth was so carefully hidden, how did the vast ocean of human history become the desert of information we see today? To understand this, we must confront the chilling reality of the Great Erasure, a systematic and coordinated dismantling of our collective memory. It was not a passive fading of time, but an active, deliberate campaign to scrub the fingerprints of advanced precursors from the timeline of man. The first strike against our heritage was the physical destruction of the archives. We see the echoes of this in the smoke of burning libraries, where centuries of recorded wisdom, celestial maps, and engineering blueprints were reduced to ash in a single night. When the physical records vanish, the bridge to the past is severed, leaving the modern mind to wander in a fog of reconstructed myths. This was followed by the systematic suppression of the oral traditions. For millennia, the most profound secrets were held in the breath of the elders, passed down through rhythmic chanting and sacred stories. By isolating these people and dismantling their social structures, the chain of spoken truth was snapped, ensuring that the nuance of the ancient world was replaced by the simplified stories of the conquerors. As empires rose, they did not just rule the land, they rewrote the narrative. History became a tool of the victor, a canvas upon which the triumphs of the new regime were painted over the ruins of the old. Every monument of the previous era was rebranded, every hero was vilified or erased, and every technological advancement was attributed to the new masters. It was a process of historical laundering, where the achievements of the ancients were stripped of their context and rebranded as primitive folk tales. Beneath the surface of these political shifts lay a more surgical cleansing of the archaeological record. We must consider the possibility of the intentional removal of artifacts that did not fit the desired narrative. Objects that hinted at a high-tech past, metals that defied oxidation, stones cut with impossible precision, or instruments of strange purpose, were quietly removed from the site, melted down, or buried deeper. They were the anomalies that threatened the official story, and thus, they had to be eliminated. Perhaps most insidious was the deliberate confusion of the linguistic keys. The ancient scripts, such as the hieroglyphs, were intentionally obscured and misinterpreted by later scholars to ensure they remained indecipherable to the common person. By making the language of the ancestors a riddle that could not be solved, the gatekeepers ensured that the true meaning of the inscriptions remained locked away. Finally, we face the institutionalized forgetting of advanced technology. This was the most profound layer of the erasure. It was the systematic removal of the concept of high technology from our collective imagination. By convincing humanity that they were at the pinnacle of invention, the authorities ensured that no one would look for the keys to the pyramids in the realm of advanced physics or resonance. The Great Erasure was the theft of our potential, a veil cast over the eyes of the world to keep us from remembering who we once were and what we were capable of becoming. But if the truth was so carefully hidden, how did the vast ocean of human history become the desert of information we see today? To understand this, we must confront the chilling reality of the Great Erasure, a systematic and coordinated dismantling of our collective memory. It was not a passive fading of time, but an active, deliberate campaign to scrub the fingerprints of advanced precursors from the timeline of man. The first strike against our heritage was the physical destruction of the archives. We see the echoes of this in the smoke of burning libraries, where centuries of recorded wisdom, celestial maps, and engineering blueprints were reduced to ash in a single night. When the physical records vanish, the bridge to the past is severed, leaving the modern mind to wander in a fog of reconstructed myths. This was followed by the systematic suppression of the oral traditions. For millennia, the most profound secrets were held in the breath of the elders, passed down through rhythmic chanting and sacred stories. By isolating these people and dismantling their social structures, the chain of spoken truth was snapped, ensuring that the nuance of the ancient world was replaced by the simplified stories of the conquerors. As empires rose, they did not just rule the land, they rewrote the narrative. History became a tool of the victor, a canvas upon which the triumphs of the new regime were painted over the ruins of the old. Every monument of the previous era was rebranded, every hero was vilified or erased, and every technological advancement was attributed to the new masters. It was a process of historical laundering, where the achievements of the ancients were stripped of their context and rebranded as primitive folk tales. Beneath the surface of these political shifts lay a more surgical cleansing of the archaeological record. We must consider the possibility of the intentional removal of artifacts that did not fit the desired narrative. Objects that hinted at a high-tech past, metals that defied oxidation, stones cut with impossible precision, or instruments of strange purpose, were quietly removed from the site, melted down, or buried deeper. They were the anomalies that threatened the official story, and thus, they had to be eliminated. Perhaps most insidious was the deliberate confusion of the linguistic keys. The ancient scripts, such as the hieroglyphs, were intentionally obscured and misinterpreted by later scholars to ensure they remained indecipherable to the common person. By making the language of the ancestors a riddle that could not be solved, the gatekeepers ensured that the true meaning of the inscriptions remained locked away. Finally, we face the institutionalized forgetting of advanced technology. This was the most profound layer of the erasure. It was the systematic removal of the concept of high technology from our collective imagination. By convincing humanity that they were at the pinnacle of invention, the authorities ensured that no one would look for the keys to the pyramids in the realm of advanced physics or resonance. The Great Erasure was the theft of our potential, a veil cast over the eyes of the world to keep us from remembering who we once were and what we were capable of becoming. Yet, the mechanism of this concealment required more than just burning books or rewriting laws. It required the establishment of specialized lineages of gatekeepers. As the knowledge of the pyramids moved from the public sphere into the shadows, it became a spiritual hazard. To possess the true blueprints was to possess a frequency that could alter the very fabric of human perception. This is where the secret societies emerged. They were not merely clubs of the elite, but necessary containers for information that was deemed too volatile for the general population. They acted as the keepers, the stewards of a forbidden archaeology that was classified as dangerous to the status quo. By compartmentalizing the truth, they ensured that while the monuments remained visible, the mechanics of their power remained occult. This transition from public knowledge to hidden mystery was a defensive maneuver against a world that was not yet spiritually prepared to wield such keys. Today, we see the modern echoes of this censorship. The academic and institutional suppression of alternative histories serves as the final layer of the veil, ensuring that the profound mysteries of the pyramids remain a whispered secret, kept just out of reach of the collective awakening. And yet, if the truth was so carefully hidden, why do we see the physical remains of these structures looking so ravaged and incomplete today? To understand this, we must look at the deliberate and systematic stripping of the exterior casing stones, an act that was far more than mere looting by opportunistic scavengers. For centuries, we have been told that the pyramids lost their smooth faces simply because later civilizations were desperate for building materials. While it is true that these stones were repurposed to construct new monuments, palaces, and temples, the reality is much more profound and far more unsettling. The removal of these casing stones was a calculated act of deactivation. These outer layers were not merely aesthetic finishes, they were the primary interface of the structure. They provided a perfectly smooth, polished surface that allowed the pyramid to interact with the atmosphere and the surrounding environment in a specific way. By stripping these stones away, later generations effectively muted the aesthetic and energetic surface of the monuments. They were silencing a broadcast. When the smooth finish was destroyed, the pyramid lost its ability to reflect and focus certain types of atmospheric energy, rendering the structure functionally inert to the casual observer. This process was a form of ritualistic killing. In the eyes of the gatekeepers who sought to control the narrative, a functioning pyramid was a threat. To neutralize a node of power, one must first strip it of its conductive skin. By dismantling the exterior, they were severing the connection between the internal chambers and the external world. It was a systematic dismantling of a machine that no longer served the interests of the new order. They were not just stealing stone, they were harvesting the very components of a power source. These casing stones, cut with such impossible precision, were moved and utilized as raw materials for the construction of new seats of power, effectively redistributing the energy of the old world into the monuments of the new. Furthermore, we must consider the loss of the aesthetic energy. The way light hit those polished surfaces created a specific resonance, a visual and energetic frequency that was lost the moment the first stone was pried loose. By exposing the rough, inner core of the pyramid, the builders of the later dynasties ensured that the structure would appear as a tomb or a relic of a primitive past, rather than what it truly was, a sophisticated piece of terrestrial technology. They successfully transitioned the pyramid from a living, breathing organ of the earth into a silent, petrified corpse. They buried the technology in plain sight by stripping its skin, ensuring that while the massive body of the pyramid remained, its soul was effectively extinguished. This was the final physical act of the Great Erasure, a way to ensure that the secrets of the architects would remain locked behind a facade of ruin, hidden by the very stones that once gave them life. But if the physical skin of the pyramids was stripped to silence their broadcast, what became of the living minds who first authored the frequency? We must now turn our gaze toward the fate of the keepers of the knowledge, the elite scholarly class who held the keys to the blueprints and the secrets of the resonance. As the empire collapsed and the Great Erasure began, these individuals did not simply vanish into the annals of history. They underwent a profound and systematic metamorphosis. They were the architects of a transition, forced to navigate a world that was rapidly becoming hostile to the truth of their ancestors. To survive, this scholarly class underwent a radical transformation into underground secret societies. They recognized that the knowledge they possessed was a spiritual and technological hazard in the hands of an uninitiated populace. They retreated into the shadows, creating clandestine networks where the sacred geometry and the mechanics of the pyramids could be studied in seclusion. These were not merely social clubs, but protective vaults for information that was deemed too volatile for the public sphere. By moving their work into these hidden corridors of thought, they ensured that the blueprints survived, even as the monuments themselves were being silenced. Simultaneously, a massive dispersion occurred. These keepers did not stay in one place. They scattered like seeds into different global cultures, embedding themselves within the foundations of emerging civilizations. They became the hidden advisors to kings, the silent masters of craft, and the veiled sages of distant lands. By weaving themselves into the fabric of various societies, they ensured that the core principles of the ancient engineering would persist in fragments, waiting for a future era of recognition. They were the architects of a global diaspora of wisdom, ensuring that no single empire could ever fully monopolize or destroy the truth. During this migration, the persecution of the engineers became a brutal reality. Those who refused to hide, those who attempted to maintain the public operation of the ancient technology, were often targeted and erased. The masters of the lost power were hunted, their names scrubbed from official records to prevent the replication of their work. Yet, despite this systemic violence, the master architect lineages managed to survive. They passed down the lineage of knowledge through bloodlines and oral traditions, preserving the precise mathematical ratios and the secret acoustic techniques that modern science still struggles to replicate. These lineages were the true curators of the human legacy. They moved the most sensitive texts and sacred calculations to remote locations, burying them in caves, deep beneath the desert sands, or within the very architecture of new, hidden sanctuaries. They transitioned the knowledge from a public science to a private initiation. They ensured that the great work would not be lost, but would instead be stored in a state of high-fidelity preservation, hidden in the world's most inaccessible corners. They became the invisible thread connecting the high peaks of the ancient past to the whispers of the modern underground, waiting for the day when the veil would finally be lifted. And yet, if the keepers of the knowledge were forced into the shadows, how did the truth of the pyramids survive in oral traditions and hidden texts? To understand this, we must look at the ingenious mechanisms of preservation, where the forbidden lore of the ancients was disguised as the common lore of the people. When the official archives were incinerated and the blueprints were scrubbed from the public record, the truth did not vanish. It simply changed its shape. It moved into the realm of allegory, hiding in plain sight within the folk tales and myths that were told by firesides for generations. These stories were never merely entertainment. They were sophisticated vessels for complex information. By encoding the structural blueprints of the pyramids into the narrative arcs of heroes and monsters, the ancient keepers ensured that the core principles of their geometry could be passed down without alerting the authorities of the new order. A description of a mountain fortress or a celestial palace in a bedtime story might actually be a veiled technical manual, a narrative map of the terrestrial antennas that once pulsed with energy. The truth became a riddle, protected by the very simplicity of the folklore that the conquerors ignored. While the stories provided a cultural shield, the technical data was preserved through the oral transmission of sacred math. This was not a casual recitation of numbers, but a rhythmic, liturgical practice. The specific ratios and acoustic frequencies required to animate the stones were woven into chants and melodies that carried a precise mathematical weight. These were the blueprints of the earth, preserved in the human voice, transmitted from elder to child as a spiritual inheritance. By turning mathematics into music, the keepers ensured that the frequency of the pyramids could survive even when the physical stones were being stripped of their skin. Deep within the archives of the clandestine, however, the most sensitive blueprints remained in hidden manuscripts. These were not books in the modern sense, but layered texts where the true meaning was buried beneath layers of esoteric symbolism. They were the hidden blueprints, kept in remote sanctuaries and private vaults, intended only for those who had undergone the necessary initiation. These manuscripts served as the ultimate backup, a high-fidelity preservation of the engineering secrets that the Great Erasure had tried to delete from the timeline of man. Even in our modern era, these secrets continue to manifest as encoded messages in contemporary art and architecture. The geometry of the ancients is still being whispered into the world, appearing in the proportions of modern cathedrals and the recurring symbols of avant-garde masterpieces. It is a form of cultural osmosis, where the old frequency bleeds into the new. Ultimately, the truth survives through the spiritual whispers of the sites themselves. The pyramids remain as dormant anchors, and those who stand in their shadow often report a sense of profound, inexplicable memory. This is the enduring mythos of the pyramids, a truth that refuses to be fully erased because it is etched into the very resonance of the planet. The keepers succeeded in hiding the keys, but they could not silence the door. The truth remains, waiting in the silence between the notes of our history. Imagine a world where the very ground beneath our feet holds secrets so profound they have been shielded by layers of sand and silence for millennia. For centuries, we looked at the pyramids as isolated monuments standing atop the desert floor. But modern technology is beginning to peel back the veil of the earth to reveal something far more complex. We are no longer merely looking at the stones above. We are peering into the hollow architecture of the deep. Through the pioneering use of muon tomography, scientists have begun to peer through solid rock using subatomic particles. These cosmic rays, which pass through the earth like ghosts, allow us to map the interior of the pyramids without moving a single block of stone. What these scans have revealed is startling. They have identified massive, internal voids and non-natural cavities that do not align with the known rooms of the Great Pyramid. These are not mere cracks or natural fissures in the limestone. They are deliberate, geometrically precise spaces that suggest a sprawling subterranean network. As we move deeper into the desert, these scans begin to hint at the existence of a vast, subterranean complex. Some researchers refer to this as the Sub-Giza complex, a labyrinth of galleries and chambers that may extend far beyond the visible footprint of the monuments. These are not the haphazard caves of nature. They show the hallmark of advanced engineering, vast underground galleries that seem to mirror the mathematical precision of the structures above. Why would a civilization invest such monumental effort into crafting a world beneath the sand? The mystery deepens when we analyze the anomalous thermal signatures detected in these regions. In certain sectors of the plateau, heat patterns emerge that defy the standard cooling cycles of the desert night. These thermal anomalies suggest areas of high energy movement or unique geological interactions that modern sensors cannot fully explain. They point toward a massive, large-scale subterranean architecture designed to interact with the Earth itself. When we consider the implications of such a discovery, we must ask ourselves what these hollow spaces were intended for. If the pyramids were the visible tips of a much larger machine, these underground galleries might have served as the primary infrastructure. They could have been designed for acoustic resonance, thermal regulation, or perhaps as a means of channeling terrestrial energies into the apex of the structures. We are beginning to realize that the desert is not just a graveyard of stones, but a blueprint of a hidden, subterranean city of engineering. Every scan, every muon trace, and every thermal spike whispers the same unsettling truth. The pyramids were never meant to stand alone. They were the anchors for a hidden world beneath the surface, a complex of hollow spaces that still waits for us to fully understand its purpose. But what if these subterranean voids were not merely hollow rooms, but the active circuitry of a massive, terrestrial power system? To understand this, we must look beyond the stone and into the very realm of bioelectrical and electromagnetic analysis. When we measure the energy signature of the Great Pyramid today, we find something that challenges our modern understanding of infrastructure. Unlike our current electrical grids, which rely on the active flow of electrons through copper wires to deliver power to a destination, the pyramid appears to function as a passive antenna. It does not seem to generate electricity in the way a power plant does, but rather harvests and focuses the existing electromagnetic frequencies of the planet itself. When we compare the frequency output of the structure to our modern grid, the difference is profound. Modern electricity is often erratic, characterized by a constant flux and a high level of noise. In contrast, the pyramid exhibits a stable, rhythmic pulse. This pulse is a low-frequency resonance that seems to synchronize with the Earth's own heartbeat, often referred to as the Schumann resonance. It is as if the structure was tuned to a specific celestial and terrestrial station, acting as a massive transducer that captures the ambient energy of the globe and concentrates it into a coherent, geometric focal point. This interaction becomes even more fascinating when we observe how the pyramid reacts with modern technology. In an age saturated with Wi-Fi and high-frequency radio waves, the pyramid's physical geometry creates a unique electromagnetic environment. It does not simply sit in the atmosphere, it interacts with it. Because of its specific proportions and the mineral composition of the granite and limestone, the structure acts as a filter. It captures these modern waves and, through its internal chambers, potentially modulates them, creating a zone where the electromagnetic signature is vastly different from the surrounding desert. Researchers have also begun to measure the Earth's hum at the Giza site, noting that the vibrations are significantly more pronounced near the base of the structures. This suggests a deep geological interaction where the pyramid serves as a bridge between the tectonic movements of the crust and the atmosphere. By anchoring into the Earth, the pyramid may be harvesting the kinetic energy of the planet's rotation and its magnetic field. If we view the pyramid as a piece of ancient technology, we must consider the potential for energy harvesting. Instead of burning fuel to create power, the ancients may have understood how to tap into the zero-point energy of the planet's own electromagnetic field. The stones are not just heavy blocks, they are the components of a vast, solid-state machine. By aligning the structure with the planet's ley lines, the builders may have created a way to draw power from the Earth, turning the entire plateau into a living, breathing circuit. The pyramid is not a tomb. It is a masterpiece of bioelectrical engineering, a silent sentinel still humming with the ancient frequency of a world we are only beginning to hear. But if such a monumental technology truly existed, why does our modern world seem so intent on keeping its functions buried beneath the sands of history? To understand the suppression of this truth, we must look beyond the stones and into the very fabric of our current global power structures. The revelation of a pre-modern civilization capable of harnessing the Earth's own electromagnetic pulse is not merely a historical footnote. It is an existential threat to the foundations of our modern economy. Consider the global reliance on fossil fuels and centralized power grids. Our entire modern civilization is built upon the extraction of oil, gas, and coal. If the truth were to emerge that a civilization once mastered the ability to harvest clean, limitless energy directly from the planet's own resonance, the economic pillars of our current world would crumble overnight. The immense wealth held by energy conglomerates depends on the scarcity of power. A shift toward a zero-point energy model, as hinted at by the pyramid's geometry, would render the current energy paradigm obsolete, leading to a massive destabilization of the global markets that dictate our lives today. This leads us to the gatekeeper theory of academia. In the halls of our most prestigious institutions, history is often curated to fit a specific narrative of linear progress. To admit that an ancient people possessed technology superior to our own would shatter the foundational belief that humanity is moving in a straight line toward greater sophistication. If we are not the pinnacle of technological achievement, we must face a humbling philosophical shock. We would have to acknowledge that we have not discovered these technologies, but have perhaps forgotten them, or worse, were intentionally disconnected from them. The suppression is also a matter of psychological control. A civilization that understands how to tap into the Earth's ley lines and celestial frequencies gains a level of autonomy that is incompatible with centralized governance. By keeping the secret reason hidden, modern institutions, ensure that the masses remain dependent on manufactured systems of power, rather than exploring the latent potential of the planet itself. The pyramids are treated as tombs to keep the public looking at the past, rather than looking at the active, living machinery of the earth beneath their feet. When the truth is finally unveiled, it will not just change our history books. It will dismantle the very architecture of our current society. It will force us to confront the reality that we are living in a state of artificial scarcity, governed by those who fear a world where energy is free and the lost power of the ancients is reclaimed by the people. The silence surrounding the pyramids is not a lack of evidence, but a deliberate wall of protection around a truth that could rewrite the destiny of the human race. But if these structures were designed to harness the very pulse of the planet, we must ask ourselves what they portend for the ultimate destiny of our species. Beyond the engineering and the hidden energy, the pyramid serves as a profound roadmap for humanity, a blueprint for a future that transcends our current biological limitations. To understand this, we must view our history not as a straight line of progress, but as a series of technological cycles. Just as the pyramids represent a peak of ancient mastery, our current era is a cycle of rapid expansion that will eventually reach its zenith and collapse, forcing a transition into a new phase of existence. The pyramids suggest that the next leap in our evolution is not merely mechanical, but a shift toward a higher consciousness. They were built as geometric anchors, designed to align the human psyche with the mathematical constants of the universe. By mirroring the proportions of the cosmos in stone, the builders were creating a training ground for the mind. They were preparing humanity to move from a state of reactive survival to a state of proactive, conscious integration with the fabric of reality. This is the next phase of our development, where the distinction between the observer and the observed begins to blur. In this coming era, we can expect to see a shift towards space-age architecture that mirrors the pyramid's philosophy. While our current cities are built to resist the environment, the future of human habitation will be built to resonate with it. We are moving toward a model of design where structures do not just house bodies, but amplify the electromagnetic and spiritual frequencies of the inhabitants. The pyramid was the first draft of this vision, a prototype for a world where our dwellings are extensions of our own neurological systems. This evolution will involve the deep biological integration of technology. We are already seeing the seeds of this in neural interfaces and synthetic enhancements, but the pyramids point toward a more seamless synthesis. The ultimate goal is a state where technology is no longer a tool we hold in our hands, but a part of our very cellular makeup. The pyramid, with its specific mineral compositions and resonant chambers, was an early experiment in how physical matter can interact with biological life to facilitate this transition. To ensure our survival through these volatile cycles, the pyramids functioned as a method of storing knowledge. They are not just monuments, they are hard drives of encoded information, preserving the blueprints of our potential. By storing this knowledge in the very bones of the earth, the architects ensured that even if a civilization collapsed, the map for the next evolution would remain. We are now reaching the point in our own cycle where we must retrieve these blueprints. The pyramid tells us that the future of human evolution is not about moving further away from our origins, but about reclaiming the latent power of the earth to propel our consciousness into the next stage of existence. But if the pyramids were designed as a roadmap for our evolution, how can we activate the latent power of these ancient monuments today? The transition from understanding the pyramid as a historical artifact to recognizing it as a living technology requires a shift in our approach. We must move beyond the role of the observer and become participants in the structure's resonance. One of the most promising avenues for this lies in the application of resonance frequency experiments. By subjecting the limestone and granite to specific acoustic vibrations, we may be able to stimulate the molecular structure of the stones. Because these materials were chosen for their unique mineral properties, they possess a latent ability to vibrate in sympathy with certain hertz. If we can identify the precise, key frequency, we might wake the structure, causing the entire monument to act as a massive, vibrating tuning fork that harmonizes with the Earth's own pulse. This process involves more than just external noise. It requires a spiritual retuning of the site. For millennia, the pyramids have stood in a state of dormancy, their energy pathways potentially dampened by the accumulation of human interference and the decay of time. To reactivate them, we must clear the static of the modern world. This is where the concept of human intention becomes paramount. In many esoteric traditions, the observer is not separate from the observed. By entering these spaces with a specific mental state, an individual's own bioelectric field interacts with the pyramid's geometry. Human intention acts as the catalyst, a spark of conscious focus that can jumpstart the flow of energy through the ancient circuitry. At the heart of this activation is the study of piezoelectricity. Many of the stones used in the construction of the pyramids, particularly the quartz-bearing granite, possess the ability to generate an electric charge when subjected to mechanical stress or vibration. By understanding how to pulse these stones, we can potentially create a localized field of coherent energy. This is not about generating power for our machines, but about creating a sanctuary for the human vessel. We can envision the pyramid being used for advanced meditation and healing, where the structure's geometry amplifies the practitioner's internal frequencies. In such a space, the pyramid acts as a biological amplifier, allowing the human nervous system to sync with the broader electromagnetic blueprint of the planet. To wake the structure is to re-establish the bridge between the terrestrial and the divine. It is an invitation to step into a laboratory of the ancients, where the walls are made of stone but the atmosphere is made of frequency. By combining modern acoustic science, the study of piezoelectric minerals, and the focused power of human consciousness, we can begin to peel back the final layer of silence. We are no longer just looking at the pyramids, we are preparing to turn them back on. And yet, if we are standing on the precipice of waking these stones, we must confront the ultimate question that governs the very existence of these monuments. What is the final truth about the pyramid's role in the cycle of time? To reach this conclusion, we must look beyond the stone and into the grand cosmic clockwork of the universe itself. The pyramids were not merely built to endure a single human lifetime or a few centuries of empire. They were designed as sophisticated chronometers for the Great Year, a massive cycle of time that encompasses the full rotation of the Earth's axis through the zodiac. By aligning the structures with the precession of the equinoxes, the ancient architects created a permanent, terrestrial record of the stars' slow dance. These monuments function as a celestial anchor, marking the slow wobble of our planet as it travels through the cosmos. They tell us that time is not a straight line moving toward a distant end, but a recurring spiral. In this cycle, civilizations rise, reach a pinnacle of technological and spiritual mastery, and then inevitably fall into the shadows of history, only to be reborn in a new iteration of the same geometric truth. The pyramid is the physical manifestation of this pulse, a beacon that remains constant while the faces of humanity change around it. The final truth is that the pyramid serves as a bridge between three fundamental pillars of existence: time, space, and energy. It is the point where these three forces converge into a single, coherent synthesis. By capturing the Earth's electromagnetic pulse and aligning it with the mathematical constants of the solar system, the pyramids act as a stabilizer for our reality. They are the anchors that prevent the human experience from drifting away from the cosmic order. They ensure that even as empires crumble and languages fade, the underlying blueprints of existence remain etched into the landscape. As we approach the zenith of our own current cycle, the pyramids stand as a silent warning and a profound invitation. They represent the final destiny of human knowledge, suggesting that our ultimate purpose is to transcend the limitations of our physical forms and integrate with the universal frequency. The pyramid is a beacon for the future, a prototype for a state of being where humanity finally understands its place in the grand design. It whispers that we are not just inhabitants of a planet, but participants in a vast, energetic symphony. When we finally decode the ultimate role of these structures, we realize they are not just remnants of what was, but keys to what will be. They are the hardware of the universe, waiting for a consciousness advanced enough to turn the key. The pyramid is the final synthesis, a masterpiece of stone and spirit that proves that time is not something we are moving through, but something we are part of. It is the ultimate truth of the cycle, a testament to the fact that while the stars may shift and the sands may blow, the geometry of truth remains eternal.